All right, well, this morning we're going to talk about what I call inside out marketing. And one way to look at it is basically how to communicate what makes you great. All right, so since most marketing and branding really starts with storytelling, I'd like to start with a story. So it was a late summer night in Las Vegas in 1996 when Tupac Shakur, the rap superstar and icon, was gunned down just off the Las Vegas Strip. Now, since then, his story has become legend, but for the Metro officer who was the first on the scene that night, a friend of mine named Chris, that night remains unforgettably real. You see, it was the night of the Tyson-Selden boxing match, and the police were prepared for the turmoil that was likely to accompany an event like a prize fight in Las Vegas. After the fight, Tupac and his producer, Suge Knight, left in Knight's BMW when a white Cadillac with 3 or 4 men inside pulled up to them. One of the men stuck a weapon out of the back window of the caddy and fired at least 13 rounds into the side of Knight's car, 4 of which pierced Tupac's body. After turning onto the strip, Knight weaved the BMW through traffic, blowing out 2 of the car's tires and denting the rims as he drove over the median in a frantic escape. The car came to a halt near the center divider. My friend Chris says, I hopped off the bike and let it go flying in the mayhem of stopped cars and doors flinging open, pulled out my gun and start yelling for everybody to get down. As I approached the BMW, I saw someone sitting in the front passenger seat. For a moment, I thought it might be the shooter until I saw bullet holes in the car door. I get the car door open, I grabbed him with my left arm and he falls into me, and I've got my gun in my other hand. The guy is covered with blood, and I immediately notice that he's got a ton of gold on, a necklace and other jewelry, and all of the gold is covered in blood. That has always left an image in my mind, he says. Suge Knight is yelling, Pac, Pac. I look down and I realize this is Tupac Shakur. So I'm looking at Tupac and he's trying to yell back at Suge, and I'm asking him, who shot you? Who did this? And he was just kind of ignoring me. And he went from struggling to speak, being non-cooperative, to a I'm at peace kind of thing, just like that. Then he started gurgling and slipping out of consciousness. At that point, an ambulance showed up and Tupac died 5 days later. So now that I shared with you that story, I want to share with you a picture of my friend Chris. Yeah, that's him. That's him. I forgot to tell you in the story that he's also in a 1970s tribute band. He plays guitar. Oh, and this is Chris too. I neglected to tell you that he's a sommelier on the court of master sommeliers. In fact, here's a business card that I did from a few years back. He's got a great sense of humor, a really funny guy. Oh, this is Chris too. He and his wife are rescue dog people, and they love to take care of abandoned pets. And that exactly is the problem with most marketing, right? We tell one story and then we dress inappropriately for it. Because most businesses, just like my friend Chris, are made up of so many different aspects to their personalities. We have so many offerings and benefits, and we have so many aspects that we just don't know who we want to be or who we're really speaking to, right? This is the picture I should have showed you after I told you the Tupac story. This is Chris, kind of the retired, hard-bitten Vegas Metro police officer. That would have made a lot more sense with my story. So always be asking yourself as marketers, does my brand story match my outfit? In other words, does my inside reality, who my business really is, what we're really about, what makes us unique, does it match my outside perceptions, your marketing and communications, what you're saying in social spaces, etc.? All right, this is Walmart. Everybody knows Walmart. It's a super strong brand, a powerful company, a global leader. They own a powerful idea in the mind, and it's low prices. You know, always low prices, save money, live better. That's what Walmart is all about. In fact, when we think about Walmart as it relates to fashion, what we often think about is the people of Walmart, right? The meme, the websites, the Facebook pages dedicated to the people of Walmart. This is what we think of when we think of Walmart and fashion. So it has kind of become a joke. So when you get a copy of Elle magazine, a legitimate high fashion magazine that's very well respected, has a great reputation. And back a few years ago, you would have found a full page ad for Walmart fashion. It just doesn't make sense. Look, when you're as big and well known as Walmart, all the money in the world you spend on advertising is not going to change the position that you own in the mind of your customers and prospects. You can't buy credibility and authenticity. You have to earn that. So I'll ask again, does your brand story match your outfit? Because I contend that what you get is what you see. So some businesses are hidden behind multiple attributes, our identities get lost, and that's why it's so important to have a strong brand persona represented in your marketing. It's vital to attracting new customers. And here's the deal. When the inside reality of your business does not align with your outside perceptions, our brand expectations are not met. So is what you're communicating in your business today painting an accurate picture of who you really are? And how can you make sure they're perfectly aligned? So why are we talking about this today? Because do you ever feel like your business is the best kept secret? I hear that a lot. I hear that a lot because people say, you know, our customers really love us. They love our products or our services or our value, but we struggle to convert new ones, right? Web visitors, if they go to your website, can they instantly tell why your business is different or better than the competition? Because if they can't, in most cases, it's because your inside reality is not aligned with your outside perceptions. Your brand story is not wearing the right outfit. So it all starts with your inside reality. So what's yours? I like one of my favorite lines, and I wish I could remember where I heard it, but branding is the truth about you, well told. So what's really inside? What's your truth? What's your brand story? What's that best kept secret that you wish everyone would know? You know, I remember being at a company function recently, and it was a holiday function, and they brought in, they catered in some great barbecue, local barbecue, and we had pulled pork sandwiches and ribs, and it was fantastic. And then when the main dinner was done, the server started to bring around this fantastic looking apple pie. And they set it down at our table, and the guy that was sitting next to me said, "Oh my gosh, this looks fantastic. I can't wait to tuck into it." And he took a big bite, and I looked over for his reaction, and he looked at me and he said, "You know, the outside looked great, but the inside, not so good." In other words, it was out of alignment. And as human beings, we don't like when things are out of alignment, right? I mean, this kind of thing drives us nuts. And you don't have to be OCD to be bothered by images like this when they just kind of are off kilter. They don't make sense. They're unaligned, right? That's because we're visual beings. And when something is visually disconnected, we kind of react negatively to it. We disconnect. So inside out marketing is about the getting and the keeping of customers. That's because your outside perceptions, how people see you through your marketing and communications, is about getting new customers. Your inside reality, how well you deliver on your brand promises and expectations, is about keeping the customers you already have. And that's the essence of inside out marketing. So here's how we're going to do that today. Quickly, we'll run through it pretty quickly this morning since we're virtual, but here's the steps. First, we want to discover your inside reality. Second, you're going to decide how best to communicate that reality in a dramatic or memorable way. And finally, we'll execute inside out marketing that gets results. So why do I say not so easy? Well, focus is hard, right? It requires sacrifice. It sometimes means that we have to jettison those attributes that are me too in the business arena in which you operate. So we'll walk through that really quickly. First, an unmet expectation right there. Angry man. So step one, discover your inside reality. Let's jump right into this. A few years back, I was lucky enough to be able to go to the island of Kauai, the beautiful garden island of Kauai, for my oldest son's wedding. And one of the things I noticed when we were there was I picked up the What to Do When You're in Kauai book, And I was blown away by how many different helicopter tours were on this tiny little island. And I started to think of the island as the communities in which we operate, where we operate our businesses. And how to get all these commodity companies doing the same thing. So I started to pick apart, do a post-mortem on their marketing, on their advertising, to kind of understand what makes these helicopter tours unique. And here's what I found. Royal Hawaiian Airlines, they talked about their equipment. They talked about their new helicopters and their brand name helicopters, and that they were new, and their marketing was all about their equipment. Safari Helicopters talked about all their awards and accolades. They had won People's Choice and Best of the Best on the island, and they listed their awards along the bottom of their advertising. This one was interesting, Cheap Tours Hawaii. Of course, the name says it all, and it's perfectly aligned with their value prop, right? They offered a savings guarantee, 75% off. But this is one of those times when you say, do I really want the cheapest helicopter tour, right? Island Helicopters, this is what we see a lot of businesses do. It's a bit of a schizophrenic brand. It doesn't really know what it wants to be. It talked a little bit about this and a little bit about that. At the end of the advertisement and the brochure, I didn't really know what they were about. So one thing to remember about Island Helicopters is if you emphasize everything, you're emphasizing nothing. E squared equals 0. This was an interesting one. Sunshine Helicopter Tours, they were probably the category leader because they took the tack of promoting the category, not the brand. So they talked about how you could only really appreciate the beauty of Kauai if you took a helicopter tour, and they could show you things that no other form of transportation could get you. Of course, when you're the category leader, you hope that the customer will then choose you after you've sold the category. And finally, there was Blue Hawaii Helicopters, and they were all about safety. They attempted to own this single word, and they had an image of a young family standing outside the helicopter, a father and mother with 2 young kids, and it kind of reminded me of the old Michelin tire ads with the baby sitting inside, you know, because so much is riding on your tires. So they wanted to own this word safety. They said they had FAA inspectors on site who would make sure that their equipment was as safe as possible. But here's what I wanted to share with you. After looking into it a little bit more, all the helicopter tours have FAA inspectors on site. All the helicopter tours had really new, nice equipment. All of the helicopter tours had won awards and got accolades. And they were all pretty evenly priced at the end of the day when you take into various considerations. So here's what I want you to take away from this. Pick a focus, something that's relevant, authentic, differentiated, and then wrap all your marketing and communications around that with one voice consistency. But you want to be different. You want to stand out. You want to give people a reason to choose you over the competition. So here's how we did that when I was at EAA. We were repositioning the organization. We were trying to come up with a new tagline. And so positioning always starts against the competition. It's done relative to the competition. So our main competition at EAA was AOPA, which is the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. And we looked at our various attributes to see how we were different, because that's what you do, you position against. So EAA is a community, where we thought AOPA was more of a commodity. EAA served a mission, where AOPA served a function, which was advocacy. EAA fulfills dreams, whereas AOPA fills a need. This is all good stuff. It's not like one is better than the other, but we wanted to find what made us unique before we could position the organization. So once we did this exercise, we came up with this super simple positioning construct, which is name plus verb plus point of distinction. And we thought of these 3. EAA is the spirit of aviation. EAA celebrates the joy of aviation. EAA is aviation's most passionate participants. And we ended up settling on EAA is the spirit of aviation. And that was about 10 years ago. And today that is still the tagline and that core truth, that inside reality of EAA. So here's how that looks when you put it into a full construct. That was a super simple construct, but You want to know who we're for, what business are we in, who do we serve, how do we compete against the competition, and here's what we came up with. EAA is a membership-based association for passionate aviation participants that offers resources and community to enhance their education and enjoyment of aviation. Unlike AOPA, the competition, which protects your right to fly by lobbying, EAA helps you participate by facilitating passion, community, and local human engagement. This unique environment allows social interaction and enhances members' participation in recreational aviation. And that's the inside reality of EAA. And here's what it looks like. Here's how it dresses, right? So the more a business or association can present a clear, concise, consistent message and invite people to stand at their side and help them realize the brand promise, the more effective they're going to be at positioning themselves. AOPA could not authentically run this image because they don't have local chapters, they're not grassroots, they're not hands-on, and that's what makes us different. So here's a critical point though. To achieve any special distinction, you don't really have to become unique in every attribute that you do. Instead, just be creative or develop a difference at a single point, a single connection with your customers that's important to them. And here's an example of that. I can't think of anything more of a commodity than going to buy tires. It's not a fun task, it's expensive. You drive into the garage or wherever you get your tires done. They always make you wait. Then some dirty, person comes up to the car and acts like you're bugging them, and then they never have the tire you want in stock, so they try to upsell you to the next, most expensive tire, and it's just not a good experience. And unless you live in the Pacific Northwest and you pull into a Les Schwab's tire, when you pull into the parking lot, they come running out, like literally running out. They're in nice, clean uniforms. They're glad to greet you. They're glad to meet you. They make you feel special. That single point of contact makes them unique because you see, Les Schwab still mounts Goodyears and Pirellis on their customers' cars, just like everyone else. Their prices are pretty much the same as everyone else, but their differentiation comes from being highly creative and dramatic. We'll come back to that, on one single point of connection with their customers. They call it sudden service. I call it pretty awesome. So here's the thing. You want to be a sword, not a broom. To get into the mind of your customers and prospects, your brand can't be like a blunt object of many ineffectual things. It's got to be a spike with all your resources and offerings perfectly aligned to deliver maximum impact. Because the less information we're given, the more likely we are to remember it. As my friends at Planet Propaganda used to say, first simplify, then amplify. So to build an inside-out brand, focus on one compelling point of differentiation, because if customers and prospects don't see the difference, essentially you're the same. You're the same as your competition. So say one thing, because saying many things creates confusion. And remember, your prospect's thinking, just give me one good reason. And then after you say your one thing, repeat it kind of incessantly. After all, one compelling story beats a dozen adjectives. When I think about sub sandwiches, this is what I think of. I think about the one thing, right? Because you got Cousins, which talks about it's bread, better day. You got Quiznos, which talks about toasted subs. You have Firehouse, which donates to local first responders. You have Subway, which is all about being fresh. You have Jersey Mike's, which is about the authentic East Coast recipes. And you have Arby's, which is about slicing the meat right in front of you. It's about the meats. It's all about fresh slice. And of course, we have Jimmy John's, which is just about speed, freaky fast, sub so fast you'll freak. But they all talk about one thing, even though they all make the same frickin' sandwiches, right? They all talk about one thing, just like the helicopter tours. Because here's the deal. We love having choices, but we hate making decisions. I don't know about you guys. I think we're all streaming a lot more now that we're quarantined. My wife and I, our favorite streaming channel is called Classic Reel. It's on Roku, but it's got about 27 or 2,800 different classic movies in it. In fact, there are so many that what I find myself doing is, unless I have a reason, like a specific movie to go and find and watch, I'll just keep clicking and clicking, and I just cannot make a decision. And then I learned that people spend an average of 7.4 minutes deciding what to stream. I can tell you, I spend a lot more time than that, but here's the deal. 21% of people who are doing this end up giving up because of their inability to make a choice. So causing a customer to think is never in your best interest. You want to make your choices so clear that a prospect doesn't need to think. They just need to act. And your brand positioning, your inside reality, your DNA, that's what's going to help prospects make a decision. So one more time, less is actually more, because the more things you show, the less that are seen. The more details you provide, the more vaguely you communicate, right? The more directions you give, the harder it is to be located. I mean, when you give a phone number, if it's really long, you're not going to remember it. The higher the number, the lower the value. So many businesses are afraid of losing customers to the competition that they strive to be all things to all people, believing it will bring them more clients, but the opposite is actually true. So what's inside? What's your DNA? Here's another example that I ran into recently. Chobani has these 4 pillars that they live by. They just happen to kind of spell DNA: delicious, nutritious, natural, and affordable. So when they're in new product development meetings, when they're trying to determine what they should go to market with, it has to pass through this DNA, this filter of delicious, nutritious, natural, and affordable. If they don't pass through this filter, they're not going to let the product go to market. And Chobani is now valued at $1.5 million. And then I just stumbled across this just the other day, that they have a new coffee creamer. And I'm guessing that it didn't end up on grocery store shelves before it passed through their filter of delicious, nutritious, natural, and affordable. So here's a great quote from Harry Beckwith that kind of sums this whole part up. If it's that hard to write the ad, you don't need better advertising. You need a better reality. And what I would say is a better inside reality. Discovered our inside reality. And now step 2 in inside out marketing is decide how best to communicate this reality in a dramatic or a memorable way. You know, I remember early on in my career when I first kind of grasped this concept, I heard this story about these 2 safety glass salesmen, and one of them was super successful and one of them was really struggling. And one day the struggling salesman went up to the other guy and said, I got to know, how you're doing. What's your secret? What's your secret to success here? And he goes, I really don't know. What I do is I take the safety glass and I walk into my prospect's office and I lay the glass on the desk and I reach into my briefcase and I pull out a hammer and I slam it down on the desk, and they place an order. And I remember hearing that, and then years later seeing this 3M security glass demonstration. This is an actual bus stop where they had real money in this security glass to dramatically demonstrate how strong their security glass is. So I kind of always had that story and this image in my head when I think about how do you make your story, your inside reality, a little bit more memorable, make it worth talking about. So here's another way to look at it. I can sit here and tell you that this watch is waterproof. And you would probably believe me if I told you that. I could also put that watch in a poorly photoshopped blob of water and kind of try to demonstrate that this watch is waterproof. That gets the idea across a little bit better. But if you're Festina, you actually sell your watches in a pouch of water. So this is what I mean by being dramatic, being memorable, and proof of your effectiveness is 50% more effective than just relying on your word or your reputation alone. So something to keep in mind. I have a client that I work with, they're in the bioremediation space. So basically they go into construction sites and places where there's groundwater or soil contamination, and they inject chemicals into the ground and they clean it up. This is called environmental remediation. And we were talking about what makes their products different from their competition. And it took a while to find their inside reality, but finally it came out. I was talking to one of their lead scientists, and it turns out that their products, unlike their competition, don't create methane. Well, methane is an off product or an offshoot when you do some of these groundwater and contaminated soil treatments, but theirs don't use or don't create methane. So we came up with this whole idea that this is a 3-panel brochure. We came up with this idea of the bovine effect, and we played it up as their competitive advantage. There is no methane that is produced when you use their products, which means it's going to be a much more safe remediation or construction site with less of a chance for fires or explosions or things like that. So how do we now demonstrate that dramatically or memorably? Well, we ended up doing a scratch and sniff. So scratch and sniff for a whiff of CH4, which is methane, but we called it derriere because we're from Wisconsin, and made it a little bit more dramatic. So dramatic and memorable. So that was kind of fun. I work with a lot of dentists because of my position at the American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry. And one of the things that they like to do is be this, they want to emphasize everything, right? They want to talk about all the different attributes of their business, their wonderful team, convenient parking. We accept all kinds of insurance. And I try to get them focused on the one thing that makes you different or better than the competition. And I like to show this example because this ad just dramatically demonstrates one specific attribute of this dental clinic, and that is they have night hours. So if that's what makes you different or unique, that gives people something to choose you for. So say one thing and then demonstrate that difference dramatically, if you can, right? One of my other clients, this is my funnest client, is a craft brewery down in Florida. They're called Helen Blazes after a lake that's down there, Lake Helen Blazes, which is right off the St. Johns River. And they're a tap room, so it's food and it's tap beers. But they wanted to start getting into some canning. They wanted to see if they can get into some local distribution with their product. And so they were toying around with different can designs, and they came back to me and said, you know, what would you do here? And I said, let's go back to the brand book. Let's go back to the brand book that we created. And the mission of the organization is to brew daring and boldly artisan crafted beers for adventurous spirits. So the brewmaster, his name is Todd. He's huge hunter, huge outdoorsman. When you look at the tap room itself, it's very rustic. It's very outdoorsy. There's hunting cues. There's fishing cues because of Lake Helen Blazes. And then I looked at the names of the 3 core brews that they wanted to can, and they were all place names. They were all geographic. So to me, that made the inside out solution fairly simple. If the inside reality was all about this rustic and hunting and fishing, then the outside perceptions ended up looking something like this. So we used this topographical map idea, Causeway IPA, Georgia Bound, and Northern Flow, all again map cues. So we created what we call the Adventure Series, and these are their 3 core brews, and that's how Inside Out looked for Helen Blazes Brewing Company. So when possible, use a dramatic or memorable way to tell your story in your outside perceptions. So step 3 then is to execute inside out marketing against results. Now this is usually the longest part of my presentation when I'm talking to a non-marketing group, talking to business people. But since this group are marketers, and this gets tactical, I just have a few things that I wanted to share with you kind of at a high level. First, I'm not sure if you're aware of this acronym. I ran into it recently and I found it pretty handy, but I like to think of marketing, when you think of it in a multi-channel way, as dripping on your prospects. So the D is differentiate your offerings. This is that first step, defining where you're positioned in the marketplace. So how are you different or unique? Next, you want to reinforce, you want to reinforce that key message by demonstrating in a memorable or dramatic way, if possible, why you're different or superior. And I just want to say that being different is better than being better. So think about that. Next, you want to inform your target market so that they can be aware that you even exist. And this is the part that's tough with CEOs and CFOs because they need to understand that this education takes time. It's not something that happens overnight. And finally, the P in DRIP is to persuade your target audience to behave in a particular way to encourage a positive behavior, like proactively setting an appointment or making a purchase or recommending you, to their friends or colleagues. So remember the DRIP acronym. I think it's pretty handy. Next, subject your marketing to these three tests. I like to think of these three tests. The first one is the "your mother must be very proud" test. So if your marketing is full of empty platitudes that no one really except your mom would care about, then it's probably a fail. So take a look at it. Remember to always speak to your clients' hot buttons, not always talking about yourself and how good you are, because that's not going to necessarily resonate with them. The next test is the "well, I would hope so" test. So when your marketing makes a specific claim, ask if your prospect is going to respond with, "well, I would hope so," because if they can, then your marketing's probably failing. So will this snake away pellets really keep away a snake? Well, I would hope so. I say that to dentists a lot because a lot of them like to put in their marketing and communications, now accepting new patients. Well, I would hope so. Otherwise, why are you even bothering to market if you don't need new patients? So remember the "well, I would hope so" test. And finally, the one that's probably the most powerful, and I do this with a lot of clients, is the cross out write-in test. So grab a piece of your collateral, look at your website, take a look at an advertisement. And if you can cross out the name of your business and write in the name of any competitor and the marketing still works, then it's probably a failure because it's making you a commodity. It's causing you to blend in to the background and not stand out. So quick review. Build your brand around a meaningful uniqueness. That's your inside reality. Then you want to make sure you're aligned. Your character, who you are, who you really are, your DNA, your conduct, how you act, how your customer-facing people treat prospects and customers, and your conversation, what you're saying in your marketing and your social spaces, to ensure that your inside reality matches your outside perceptions. Remember, does your brand story match your outfit? And then, if possible, articulate that uniqueness in a dramatic or memorable way in everything you do and say. Love this quote from one of my mentors, Roy Williams: "Dig for the diamond. Find the story that is uniquely and wonderfully your own, then tell that story with every ounce of your being." And that is inside out marketing. So you want the secret sauce? That's what everybody asks. They come up to me at the podium afterwards. Okay, give me the shortcut. Just cut to the quick. What's the secret here? And here's what I would say it is. Decide what you have to say. Think of 100 different ways to say it. Say it convincingly. Say it again. And keep on saying it. And here's an example of that. Just a fun little video. This is an actual commercial that ran in, I think it was Arkansas or Tennessee. And it cracks me up. There's usually a little delay.
Howdy, y'all. This here's Mike. Down at Mike's Golf Shop, where we buy golf. That's right. We buy golf clubs. Mike's Golf Shop. Come on over here. We buy golf clubs. Over at Mike's Golf Shop. Come on down here. We buy golf clubs. That's right. We buy golf clubs. We buy golf clubs. We buy golf clubs. We buy golf clubs. We buy golf clubs.
All right, so what's the name of his business? Mike's. What does he do? They buy golf clubs. I mean, you pretty much get it right there. So one more unaligned image for you. And I really appreciate everybody's time and getting up for this virtual signature session. Thank you.
Terrific. Thanks very much, Mike. I appreciate it. And thank everybody for coming. Are there any questions that are out there? If there are, you can post them in the chat. Otherwise, what I think we'll do is we can unmute everybody as well. And if everybody wants to get along and talk, we can do that too. But there are definitely a couple questions coming through. So Tony, I'll let you read it if I can find you, but.
I got it.
Yeah, so Tony, why don't you go ahead?
You want me to say it? Okay.
Yeah.
So, so Mike, everybody, first of all, I appreciate this webinar where nobody has mentioned, you know, the 5 letters of doom. Right, I appreciate that. Although I am going to bring it up. So everybody, in fact, even from the AMA, I got an email that said, in this difficult time, right? So everybody is saying this. So I feel like everybody's being pressured to say this, otherwise they're going to be insensitive. So have you noticed that? Has everybody else noticed that? Like you feel like you have, everybody's noticed those messages.
Absolutely.
Does it feel like you have to say that? And you're sensitive if you don't? And with that kind of tone out there, you know, everybody did the same thing after 2008, right? Everybody was like, in this economy, right? That was those are the 3 words. So how do you differentiate in these difficult times?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. In fact, I've been starting to see, I saw one yesterday that cracked me up. I'm starting to see memes now that are making fun of the fact that every business that you've ever shared your email address with is now coming out with these in these difficult time messages. I saw a really funny one yesterday where this guy was just, you know, how I feel every time I get one of those, and he just had a great face. But I would say that it, you know, it depends on what kind of business you're in, and I'll go ahead and go back to dentistry. Dentists were particularly hard hit by this, and as a membership association, we were beholden to give our members the resources to reopen safely. And here's how the PPE is going to work. And here's the best way to handle your staff furloughs. And so we needed to communicate to them as a resource, and we curated content from a bunch of different sources so that we could provide them value during this difficult time. I would say that if you're not a business that touches, that it just turns into white noise. In fact, I've been pretty irritated over the last 3 or 4 weeks just deleting all these emails from people I haven't heard from in years coming out of the woodwork to say that these are difficult times. So I think that's a tough one because I do think it could backfire on you.
Yeah, great. Thanks for the question, Tony. I appreciate it. Hey, Ryan has a question. Ryan, I'm going to unmute you. I'm trying to unmute you. There you go.
Okay. Yeah, a quick question. I was wondering, kind of if you're starting out or if you're going into, you know, a new market, what brand advice would you have to a company who's kind of competing against more experienced and entrenched companies?
Yeah, I think that's a really common thing. I was doing from a startup brand for a dental implant company in Washington, D.C., and they were competing directly against what's called these implant mills who can do it so like almost like assembly line implants. And they ask the same question as you are, Ryan. They're saying, well, how do I ever compete against this? We can't compete against them on price. We can't compete against them on turnaround time. And what we ended up doing was position, you know, but you can, as a smaller competitor, nip at the heels of the big guys. And the way you do that is by finding something that you can do that they can't. And what they determined for them that was compassion, empathy, concerned. We put ourselves in your shoes before you put yourself in our chair. And it was this idea that, look, you could go to the implant mill and probably pay a little bit less, but we're going to care for you. We're going to care for you during the procedure, after the procedure. We're going to hold your hand. We're going to make sure this goes well. We're going to make sure you love the result. And it's just a matter of looking at what they're doing and then finding what you can do to be different and relevant to that audience. So that's kind of what I would say is there's always a different place that you could go, especially as a more lithe, flexible, smaller competitor.